Curing hate is a tall order, one with little or no precedent. The job involves interactions with people who openly wear their hatred for someone else on their sleeve, who voice their hatred for others and call for the destruction of other people's lives and communities. There is no training for a job like this. Rather, it is a life mission. The only people who have a sliver of a chance of connecting and calling in haters are those who have lived both lives. In this episode of Careers That Matter, Tony McAleer, a man who rose to high ranks within the white supremacist community and then left, takes us inside his career as the author of a movement that employs radical compassion to call people in rather than call them out. Tony McAleer, you have a very interesting career at the moment. How do you describe what you do?
Oh, that's, so at Life After Hate, we help people involved in the violent far-right, white nationalism and stuff, leave those groups behind.
Or also known as alt-right or some kind of variation on that name.
Yeah, and we encourage them to come back to humanity.
How do you do that? How do you become the person who does that? Like, what was your life journey that got you to that point?
Well, what makes us really good at doing that is that all of the co-founders of Life After Hate, all 6 of us, were involved in groups or groups like that in the past. So, and the reason we started was because there was no one around to help us leave, and it would have been so much easier if there was.
Okay, so let's talk about your career development, because it's not going in the direction initially that you would say, oh yeah, I see a bright future here where you're going to be helping humanity. As a matter of fact, you were trying to silo people and see the elimination of certain people from society. How does that wind up influencing you as you move forward?
I mean, certain skills are transferable.
Yes.
In a strange way, leadership, interpersonal skills, charisma, that kind of thing are very easily transferable.
And you were a persuasive communicator, as I understand, and still concede from your book that you still have a way with words.
So we can... we don't have to throw the baby out with the bathwater. If we separate the ideology and the ill intention that accompanied those traits before, we can use those traits for the betterment of humanity. We can use them in a completely different way. And I think it's important to recognize that, sometimes when we're involved in something that's terrible and horrific, often you have to learn skill sets or acquire skill sets that that actually are transferable in other places.
Mm-hmm. One of those skill sets, though, is also how to transition out of that life into your new life. That has got to be difficult because you can't go to school for that.
Well, yes and no. I mean, there's no advertised school for that.
There isn't.
But I probably spent close to 1,000 or over 1,000 hours in one-on-one counseling or group, intensive group, week-long group counseling programs and stuff like that. So in a way, I did go to school. Mm-hmm. There's an awful lot of education that I received about myself, about my motivations, that taught me an incredible amount. Because doing that in the group environment, I don't just learn about, unpack my own motivations. I'm witness to others unpacking their motivations for whatever they're into. Mm-hmm. I was the only one that had my particular background, but in that desire to heal and understand myself, and in that group environment, I learned a tremendous amount about other people and about human beings.
So there has to be a willingness to go through that process of self-discovery, especially if you've been trying to hide from yourself.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I think in the book, I talk about radical compassion, and there's 3 components to radical compassion. One is your practice of compassion has to take you outside your comfort zone. Number 2, and I think this is the most radical thing a human being can do is you have to go inwards. You have to mine compassion from yourself. You have to get to know yourself. And the more you know yourself, the more you recognize other people. And the third one is the social activism part, where compassion is taking action to alleviate the suffering of another. Radical compassion involves the component of not just stopping there, but involving changing the environment which gives rise to or supports the suffering. But that part about going in is the hardest part, because nobody wants to go there. But the more you do it, the more you understand people, because you start to see yourself in other people and other people in you, and the world becomes a mirror. You know, and so I'm very much informed about myself by what I see outside of me.
And so then therefore that arms you with the experience and insight that you require to be, as you described yourself to me earlier, as being a life coach. You can't be that life coach without understanding of what it is that you are helping to address. And that having gone through that experience yourself enriches the knowledge that you can share. What does that average day look like for you when you're in the process of helping somebody else on that journey of self-discovery and hopefully another way of life?
That's, it's interesting. A lot of my work these days is more, I do a lot of traveling to, share information, to educate policymakers, law enforcement, government, all that kind of thing. So I don't do nearly as much of the one-to-one stuff as I used to, but there's still a good number of people that I coach and mentor. And then I also have.
So as part of that, if you've developed that relationship with somebody, is it part of it, even though you've kind of moved on to the day-to-day responsibility of that, do you still have an obligation to them that if they're in a moment of need, that they can reach out to you?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Because if you're not there, then where do they turn?
Yeah, and then there's other people in the organization that can help them with that.
Yeah.
But there's people that they can call me whenever. We're in regular contact most of the time, so it's pretty. It's got to the point where it's easier, much easier. It's the beginning is always the challenging.
Yes.
The challenging part, and once we get them over that hump, then it's pretty good. And once they start to develop an identity unto themselves and who they are, then like myself with my mentor and counselor. A lot of intensive work at the beginning. Then I would just go in for regular checkups. So if there's a problem I can't figure out, I go and get that other set of eyeballs on it to
touch base
to guide me to figuring it out myself. So
most of your work these days is now in helping to bolster the ranks of Life After Hate.
Yeah, I'm like almost like the brand ambassador or something like that, and to get.
Well, you write a book, you do interviews like this.
Absolutely, and it's spending time with the tech companies and letting them, know what their responsibilities are and how they have contributed to this and how they can help be part of the solution.
Yeah, the unintended consequences of creating an easy communication link.
Yeah, no, it's it's definitely a force magnifier for whatever.
Yeah.
For social good or for social ill. The technology doesn't care.
Right. It's fulfilling work, though, is it?
Definitely fulfilling work. It's my passion. It's Life After Hate's about to change its mission statement, but my personal mission statement is to inspire people to a place of compassion and forgiveness for themselves and for all people.
Well, what a great way to move forward in life with that perspective.
Yeah, no, it's and when I was in the depths of that movement, and think about who you were at the age of 4, and your audience should do the same. And I think back to who I was, and little Tony was this bright, curious, sensitive, mischievous, stubborn, defiant, little kid that was open to the world. And, life happens and we become not so open and closed off, and we put on masks and project ourselves to be someone we're not in order to feel safe. When I was in the depths of being in that movement, I was living a life that was 180 degrees opposite, completely out of integrity with that core essence of who I was. And when I was in that space, nothing in my life worked well. Relationships didn't work well, employment didn't work well. Everything was an uphill struggle. And since I've started the healing work and this stuff that I do, the more and more my life comes back into alignment, back into integrity with that core essence of who I am, life becomes easier. It becomes not the struggle to swim upstream, but it's floating downstream. And it's, once I figured that out, so now it's just constantly, what next do I have to do to bring myself more and more into alignment, and then, enjoying a life of fulfillment, of abundance.
No, none of us get to where we are in life alone, entirely alone, even though we may feel alone. And in your book, and I don't think that we've given your mother credit that she probably deserves. Do you want to give a bit of a shout out to her? Because
Absolutely.
I get the feeling that she really played a pivotal role in helping you move away from one lifestyle to the next.
Absolutely, absolutely, she did, and it's she's the perfect example of that compassion with healthy boundaries and consequences. And her love for me was unconditional. Her relationship with me and helping me raise 2 children on my own was very conditional, and that's where she had that leverage. And, well, if you want my help, you got to stop hanging out with those people. You got to start doing this, and it was created a necessity to change where there may have been some resistance. And so that's an incredibly strong and powerful woman.
And she hung in there with you.
She hung in there, and but not in a passive or a permissive way. She was tough, that tough love.
Good for her. And good for you. I appreciate you coming in and sharing your career path, which is not a usual one, but also earlier for our conversation where we talked about life after hate and the book that you've written, The Cure for Hate. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yeah, great.